I started to run. When I scope out my country, I walk by a gun. Ole, 'cause that is what they promise we. A lot's going on in the sun. So I come here to bring wisdom, so we don't burn down. We lovely society. See, a new government has the assignment to put we country into alignment. But every time they read us with their ego, it's the vulnerable who feeling that blow. Lord, is it ignorance or is it arrogance? I don't know what to call it in this instance. Look at paradise right in front we eyes, but we still want to talk about who we despise.
Tell me where else can we go?
If we start to mash up the good things we know.
Tell me where else can we go?
If we treat we traditions like a Barbie show, you could fix everything on we island. Put gunships on we back like a tyrant. You could put 10 radars all up Scarborough. But don't forget,
this is Trinidad.
We love we freedom, and every citizen will agree that no oppression will be accepted by our Trini. We come from long days on the ground, working hard until daylight come, so we'll see it wrong to be a financial donkey. 'Cause every day we see a new taxation that causing a new kind of sufferation. And when you don't create that irritation, you send police to fix with desperation. Lord, where's the common sense? Where's the true intent to make you think oppression is relevant? Don't be shocked, my friend, when we start to bend and you see them placards in front of the parliament.
Tell me where else can we go?
If we little children are not free to grow.
Tell me where else can we go?
If they try to ban the words in the calypso, you could try to stop social media or the taping of police murders. You could rewrite a bill like this also. But don't forget, this is Trinidad. Take one look around. Even lingo and all could see confusions in tongue. And it's affecting everybody. Politicians and Facebook trolls. Even Kaisonians lost their role. The world's upside down. And I'm worried for my country. 'Cause every day I see victimization, racial and social aberration. We saying is love need to go wrong, but we spreading this thing like a toxin. Man, things getting so tense. Some can't pay their rent, and the effect of this feeling permanent. But what scares me though, just so that you know, is the money we about to borrow.
Tell me where else can we go?
If the IMF start to pull we toe.
Tell me where else can we go?
If we toilet paper start to run too low, you could stress out the CPEP worker. Take a fool and make him a leader. You could change every board 'cause it's your show. But don't forget, this is Trinidad. I know it's good intentions. We Prime Minister brutal measures would only cause rebellion in T&T, like what caused Cambule in times of old. And it's so the story unfold. It's that rebellion that give we people identity. So careful how you deal with we intellect, 'cause DNA remembers every aspect. Not every time we cry it's just politics. Your mind could start to play you some dirty tricks. Look, remember that honor comes before minister, and that's why we give you so much power. So don't let us down and don't let us frown. We need to see a 360 turn around.
Tell me where else can we go?
If your promises start to look untrue,
Tell me where else can we go?
if your own voters losing trust in you, you could do what you want with what intent. You could bar talk the independent bench. You could change the country that we once know. But don't forget, this is Trinidad.
Our defending monarch, Elon
Francis.
Don't forget.
And everybody in the surprise calypso, right?
Ladies and gentlemen.
Five weeks ago, as the country emerged from a state of emergency, the Honorable Prime Minister expressed her resolve and that of her government to continue to monitor the activities of the criminal gangs in Trinidad and Tobago. She said then that she would not hesitate, if the need arose, to use all powers at her disposal to quell any upsurge in gang activity. Last night, upon learning of threatened further violent actions and planned reprisal killings by gang members, the Prime Minister triggered the provisions of the Constitution and asked Her Excellency the President to declare a state of emergency in Trinidad and Tobago.
The proclamation was signed by Her Excellency and a state of emergency came into effect at 12:01 this morning. This government has demonstrated a clear, decisive, zero-tolerance approach to gang-related crime. Upon learning of a threat to state actors and facilities emanating from within the prisons, the government declared a state of public emergency in July of 2025. That state of emergency was extended by the Parliament in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and ended on January the 31st, 2026. During that period of time,
July 2025 to January 2026, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the Defense Force conducted a number of operations and isolated certain gang leaders from the gangs and enterprises that they control. The threat was eliminated, and significant headway in dismantling the organized criminal networks which have terrorized our population for over a decade, murdering members of the population and other citizens in cold blood and perpetrating heinous, despicable, violent crimes across the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. The murder rate and number of serious crimes dropped precipitously to the lowest recorded numbers in years, owing in no small measure to the diligent intelligence-led efforts of the TTPS and the armed forces. The government, during that time and afterwards, sought to enact legislation that would allow the country to continue along this trajectory. The trajectory of drastically curbing crime and criminal activity by, in part, uprooting and permanently dismantling the gangs
that were allowed to grow in power, reach, and wealth unchecked for the decade preceding our tenure. We were successful in some of these legislative efforts, but unfortunately unsuccessful in others. As the Prime Minister stated earlier this morning, the National Security Council met and was given a briefing by the Commissioner of Police last night. The Council was advised that over the last several days, a number of violent criminal activities have taken place in the full gaze of a horrified population, I might add, most of which have been carried out by members of organized criminal gangs. We were further advised that criminal gangs had increased acts of violence on a scale so extensive that they have resulted in multiple deaths in mass shootings, and that pattern of behavior was set to continue. The Prime Minister and the National Security Council had no choice. We immediately determined to advise Her Excellency, as I have said, that a state of public emergency existed in Trinidad and Tobago. This government is determined to never allow this country to deteriorate into the state of chaos and bloodshed which we met in May of 2025 when we took office. We shall never accept the slow, dangerous surrender to the criminal gangs in our midst. There are examples in the region of territories that have allowed that. Trinidad and Tobago's fate
will be different. Under the conditions of the state of emergency, the TTPS and the armed forces will be able to do what they are entrusted by law to do in a manner that would match the escalating danger that is being posed to all of us as law-abiding citizens and to the very rule of law in Trinidad and Tobago. From the very early hours of this morning, strategic operations have commenced by the protective services. These will continue in an intelligence-led, targeted, and deliberate manner until these threats to public safety are eliminated. We take this initial approach while concurrently putting various other measures in place that would constitute a longer-term, sustainable approach to maintaining order, peace, and safety in our society. We will continue to inform the public of various initiatives and operations taking place during this state of emergency as appropriate. I thank you.
And so, on the third day of his war against Iran, speaking in the majestic East Room of the White House, Donald Trump reminded the world of what is most important to him.
We have a lot of great service members here with us, too, in this beautiful building. Isn't it beautiful? We're adding on to the building a little bit. We're improving the building.
I started to run country, I walk by a gun. Ole, 'cause that is what they promise we. A lot's going on in the sun. So I come here to bring wisdom, so we don't burn down. We lovely society. See, a new government has the assignment to put we country into alignment. But every time they read us with their ego, it's the vulnerable who feeling that below. Lord, is it ignorance or is it arrogance? I don't know what to call it in this instance. Look at paradise right in front we eyes, but we still want to talk about who we despise.
Tell me where else can we go?
If we start to mash up the good things we know.
Tell me where else can we go?
If we treat we traditions like a Barbie show, you could fix everything on we island. Put gunships on we back like a tyrant. You could put 10 radars all up Scarborough. But don't forget,
This is Trinidad.
I'm going to start by just making a few brief comments. A number of you may or may not have been present at the recently concluded, meaning just an hour ago, press conference of the government. And I'm starting there because I asked the question that I ask several times when I stand here. Where was the chair of the National Security Council at that press conference? Because I'm sure that you, the members of the media, would have had a lot of questions to ask. And no doubt when we have completed our remarks, you would ask us a lot of questions. So we continue to have a missing prime minister from these press conferences. And I call on the prime minister again to make herself available to take questions from the media as it relates to this very important matter of the state of emergency. But let me remind you what the Honorable Prime Minister said when Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley was Prime Minister and a state of emergency was declared at the time. This is what the Honorable Kamala Prasad-Bissessar said. The SOE's lack of seriousness is evident as Rowley did not find it important to attend the press conference to address citizens, but chose to play golf and enjoy the 50 million taxpayers' dollars for fetting and rum drinking. That was her response. The Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago is the head of the National Security Council, yet he has gone into hiding. I ask you, who has gone into hiding? Is he afraid of the very criminals that have caused so much death and destruction in our country? The Prime Minister could not find the courage to address the nation. But here again, we find that our Prime Minister continues to make herself absent. Let me just read a couple of the statements from the Prime Minister. Having stated that the National Security Council met, and I'm reading because it's important. The National Security Council noted, following the end of the previous state of emergency on January 31st, 2026, there has been an increase in violent criminal activity across the country, most of which has been carried out by members of organized criminal gangs. Now, I know the Honorable Scotland is going to deal with a couple of issues, but it's important for us to note that in this recently concluded state of emergency, we must ask ourselves, how many of the hundreds of persons that were arrested and kept in custody, how many of those persons were charged? How many of those persons were convicted? But here again, they are calling another state of emergency. And why am I asking you about that? Because when I was a senator a couple years ago, I filed a question to the then Minister of National Security, Brigadier Sandy. And at that time, and that would have been the 2011 state of emergency, over 8,000 persons were arrested by this same UNC government. And following their arrest, there was a conviction rate of less than 10%. Over 8,000 persons. And they recently concluded SOE. When we get the figures, it is no different. And here again, there is another SOE. It is important to note that the Newsday article by Joey Bartlett, thanks to the cops, not the SOE. So what is it that the Commissioner of Police was saying? The Commissioner of Police was saying, while some may fear that when the SOE is lifted, murders will rise once again, Commissioner Guevara said he is confident the measures the TTPS have put in place will have a lasting effect. The reduction in murders and serious crimes, he argued, was tied to precision targeting of specific violent offenders, gang leadership, firearm traffickers, and facilitators. So here it is, and this is January, and you would recall that there was this press conference, and they made it abundantly clear. As a matter of fact, there has been a boast as it relates to the reduction of crime. The commissioner said it's because of the police. But let's go a little further. The Prime Minister attended the CARICOM heads of government in St. Kitts, and this is what the Prime Minister had to say. In 2025, with a change of policy to treat with drug cartels and gangs as violent terrorist organizations, the military action by the American military in the Caribbean caused Trinidad and Tobago murder rate to decrease by 42%, or 257 murders. This is just last week. So you have January, that the reduction has nothing to do with the SOE, it has to do with the police. Then you have the Prime Minister going to CARICOM and indicating you have a reduction by 42%. And the last comment I will make at this time, because I'll be here again, is that the radar that was set up in Tobago, they gave us a clear indication that this radar is going to result in a reduction of crime. But here it is, having said and having boasted about a reduction in crime, here it is again, that they come and say to us that they have some information. The National Security Council was informed that intelligence recently gathered indicated credible threats to attack police officers, prison officers, and other members of the security and legal services. I want to remind the media and members of the public. We stood here a couple months ago, and you would remember that the SOE had to deal with ministers, members of the judiciary being attacked, and they were indicating to the public that they were trying to put in place measures to avoid a bloodbath in Trinidad and Tobago. They come now, just a month ago, everything was fine. Reduction in crime, things under control. You have put in place all sorts of measures using technology, and you're saying to the public, not the SOE, we now have everything in place. And just literally days later, after the Prime Minister made her statement in CARICOM, we now have a totally different story. I want to remind members of the public about the situation in 2011, when they told us the same thing. Hotspots, And Honorable Scotland is going to deal with the Zoso bill because they want the public to believe that the opposition is responsible for the upsurge in crime. I want to repeat myself. I made it abundantly clear when I became the leader of the opposition that we as the opposition recognize the issue of crime in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have made it abundantly clear about our willingness to work with the government to deal with this matter of crime. But we are not a rubber stamp opposition. It cannot be that you bring bills before the parliament, and before the bills are even debated, you say to members of the Senate that we are not going to deal with any amendments. You don't even wait. You don't even listen to what the amendments are being put forward. But your position is, what we bring, you must accept. What we bring, you must vote for. Not collaborate, not work together, not a give and take, not willing to accept the expertise of the opposition, but simply to say to us, take it or leave it. And when you propose amendments, then you come with this make-up story about independent senators asking the government favors for their vote. And up to today, the Prime Minister cannot name those independent senators. And that is because that allegation was totally false. Thank you very much, members of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Leader, for highlighting the inconsistencies, the mendacity, and the overall flip-flopping of our absentee Prime Minister. Up next to highlight issues regarding the emergency regulations of 2026 and other matters of national security, we welcome the Honourable Keith Scotland, SC, Member of Parliament for Port of Spain South.
Distinguished Leader of the Opposition, distinguished colleagues, honourable members. This may be one of the most crucial press conferences called by the opposition in our history, as being opposition from April 28th, 2025, for the simple reason is that I think that we are now not at crossroads, but we are at a point of realization in this country. And the realization that we must come to it is an inescapable conclusion that this present UNC government has absolutely no idea how to govern this country, and particularly how to deal with crime and criminality in Trinidad and Tobago. I want to start by outlining how we have reached here. And it's really in keeping with the modus operandi of this government that whilst we were sleeping, the government declared yet another state of emergency effective today, Tuesday, 3rd of March, 2020. It's critical because this is the implementation of a series of extraordinary powers by this administration, which we say demonstrates the lack of capacity of this government to govern Trinidad and Tobago and to deal with crime. Is the government's crime plan merely a recycling of declarations of states of emergency and blaming the opposition? Because that is the plan. Let me give you the contrast in principle. When in opposition, the then Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, when Dr. Rowley declared a state of emergency in December 2024, said that these measures should only be used in extreme circumstances, not as a political tool to manage criminal behavior. She described the state of emergency as an overreach, as unconstitutional. Today we have the same government, not 1 year in as a government, having declared not one, not two, but 3 states of emergencies. What has changed? If the measures were unconstitutional then, what do you have to say about the triple implementation of these measures? Is it not unconstitutional now? If it was overreach then, what is it today? Isn't it overreach now, or is it purely incompetence on the part of the government of Trinidad and Tobago? And that is the position of the opposition. Let me deal directly with the elephant in the room, which is the blame game that will be played by this government, and they're trying to play it now. The Minister of Homeland Security, Roger Alexander, sought to blame the opposition for the crime situation following the defeat of the Zones of Special Operations legislation, the ZOZOs. Let me be clear from the outset. Crime in Trinidad and Tobago is the responsibility of the government, primarily. The opposition has a role, and when good legislation is brought to Parliament, the leader has said that we will support it, and we have been consistent in the support of good legislation. We say that the ZOZOs, that was not good legislation, and we could not support it. But what we did support was the extension of the state of emergency in the first instance, because we understood what was happening in Trinidad and Tobago. When citizens are being gunned down in our communities and families, as we did yesterday in Mango Rosa, burying their families, and our murder toll now stands at 60 as of February 20, 2026. The government must man up and take responsibility for its failure to adequately address that. And that is in circumstances where for 6 months of their existence as a government, there were 2 states of emergencies in Trinidad and Tobago. The country deserves better leadership, and the country does not deserve the scapegoating that is being perpetrated by this government. So the logic is, you did not support ZOZOs, you are responsible for crime. Where on what planet can that logic make sense? But if you say it often enough, they hope that it gathers traction. The grim reality facing Trinidad and Tobago is that in just 2 months, in 2026, Trinidad and Tobago has recorded the following, and I want to be clear with the statistics so the country can understand that when we speak as an opposition, we do our homework. 60 murders to date. 5 double murders compared to 3 during the same period in 2025. And the first triple homicide of the year in Laventille. Let us understand that these are families and these are people that are being affected. There are primary victims and there are secondary victims. We have to call on this government to account for their stewardship and their lack of competence in dealing with crime and particularly murders in Trinidad and Tobago. What about McShine Lands, Laventille, Keon Alexander, Dwayne Alexander, Jesse Nelson? What does the Minister of Homeland Security have to say about that? What plans has he put in place? We asked a question in Parliament on Friday, and what we got was waffle and deflection, not one positive answer. In fact, when he stood up to answer, he said he's in a zozo state of mind. What does that mean? What does that tell you? That the only plan that this government had was either zozos or states of emergency. Indolence and incompetence at its highest. What about the 18-year-old Jesus Sargent and 29-year-old Kyle Alexander of El Dorado Road? What about them? What about Curtis Bird Pierre gunned down outside a food outlet in Valsaine? This government does not, and we say cannot, address criminality and crime in Trinidad and Tobago. It is clear that all they can do is to ascribe blame to the opposition when they are failing in their sworn duty. A security officer, Minford Alec, was murdered at a gas station in Aruca. At the scene, 28 spent 9mm shells were recovered. What was the markings on it? 5 marked TTPS 9mm. The opposition takes note of this and calls on the minister to account and to do his job and stop trying to deflect. These names that we have called these names particularly because they are not opposition statistics. They are real people with real lives, with real victims and real secondary victims. They are not opposition bullets. They are not opposition failures. They are failures of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, who today have cemented the proof that they are not ready, fit, and proper to govern Trinidad and Tobago in a society that respects the rights of human beings. Yet, instead of presenting a comprehensive national crime strategy, the government has chosen 2 approaches. 1, declare a state of emergency, or 2, blame the opposition for not supporting the Zozo bill. How does that present itself as a reality? This is not a plan by this government, This is political deflection. On the Zozo bill, the government's law reform zones of special operations bill failed in the Senate because it required a special majority and it did not secure the necessary support. We put a marker on the reaction of the government when that transpired. It was as horrible and disingenuous as it gets. As the Honorable Leader of the Opposition said, they tried to railroad the Senate. How could you approach a debate by saying, I will consider no amendments? What are you telling anyone? That they are rubber stamps? And when it failed, what you had were wild and unsubstantiated accusations and labeling and putrid remarks about persons who have volunteered to serve this nation. We say that that is as unacceptable as it gets. The key operational components cited by the Honorable Minister when asked about his plan was that there will be joint patrols between the police service and the defense force. What is new? What do you need a Zozo or a state of emergency to implement such a plan? That is operable under the law as it stands now. In other words, under our current existing legal system, you can have legitimate patrols, joint patrols between the police service and the defense force. That is nothing novel in Trinidad and Tobago. If the minister believes that joint patrols are required, nothing in the law permits him from deploying them today. In fact, he has already stated that Laventille will be treated almost like a Zozo. I do not know what that entails, but I can tell you that the MPs, Laventille forms part of the constituency that I have the pleasure and the honor to represent. We will be looking at that very, very, very closely. So we ask, if you can operationalize Zozo-style policing without the legislation, how then can you blame the opposition for your failures? How then can you blame the opposition for your failures? Now, it has been said that there's been a decrease in murders by 42%. The statistics for the first 2 months of this year do not support that. Where is the statistical evidence that there's been a 42% reduction in murders? It is just words without support from any statistic or any source that is credible. Beyond the debate of the Zozos, the nation has witnessed the disappearance of 2 kilograms of marijuana from a police station. If that had happened under the watch of the People's National Movement, there would be a call for a commission of inquiry. No such call has happened. There would be an uproar. They would call for the resignation of the Prime Minister, even though the Prime Minister would have nothing to do with the removal of the kilograms of marijuana. Police issued ammunition recovered at a crime scene and a murder in Aruca. No single bill can cure these deficiencies. That is the point that we are making in the opposition. And if this government is serious about crime and criminality and it wants to work meaningfully with the opposition instead of, and I'm sorry for using the colloquial term, old talk, we are here, we are ready to work. They have never presented, they give us bills 2 days before, 49 pages, 121 clauses, and we have been ready in Parliament every Friday. We are workers and performers in the opposition. From Ms. Beckles, Mr. Stewart, Senator Brown in the Senate, we have Mr. Devines. We are workers and not talkers. The last point I want to make, the second to last point I want to make is this. This government has demonstrated a troubling pattern for Trinidad and Tobago. In July 2025, they declared a state of emergency and extensions followed. They attempted to introduce a Zozo bill, which was rightly rejected. And now, come 3rd of March, another state of emergency declared overnight. Is this the new crime strategy for Trinidad and Tobago? Governed by emergency, blame the opposition. But the media, there's one piece of this legislation that I want to address, which will be of serious concern to you. In the emergency powers regulation, there's a regulation 11 that reads as follows. No person shall endeavor, whether orally or otherwise, to influence public opinion in a manner likely to be prejudicial to public safety. No person shall endeavor, whether orally or otherwise, to influence public opinion in a manner likely to be prejudicial to public safety. Who decides what the person has uttered in whatever manner is prejudicial to public safety? And here is the nub. they tied it into the section that follows. Notwithstanding any rule of law to the contrary, a police officer may, without a warrant, or with or without assistance and with the use of force if necessary, enter and search any premises, stop and search any vessel, vehicle, or individual, whether in a public place or not, if he suspects that any evidence of the commission of an offense under Regulation 8 or 11 is likely to be found on such premises. What it means is this. They can say that a person tried orally or otherwise, print media, to have social media, a post, a TikTok, to prejudice public safety. And in those circumstances, a police officer without a warrant, with the assistance of someone else, with the use of force, can apprehend and detain such a suspect without the supervision of the court. This is a serious concern for Trinidad and Tobago. Media people, we sit here and we lap this up without understanding the import of it. We have reached a very crucial phase in the existence of our democracy in Trinidad and Tobago. And I call upon all right-thinking citizens, and I call upon you, the media, to be vigilant with your rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the Honourable Keith Scotland, SC, for that review and honestly in-depth dissertation of what is happening in front of us and all of the things that we are seeing and things that you should be aware of regarding these emergency regulations 2026. We've heard some scathing remarks made regionally and internationally when it comes to our representation.
And our representatives of the government recently. And to touch on some of these matters, we welcome Leader of Opposition Business in the Senate, Dr. the Honorable Amory Brown.
Thank you very much, Brother MP Hans Devines, doing a great job as usual at these media conferences. I recognize the most distinguished and honorable leader of the opposition, who's also political leader of the People's National Movement, the Honorable Penelope Beckles-Robinson, and other colleagues that are present. Well, really continuing on the theme established by the leader of the opposition, in reflecting on the last 10 months and feeling a sense of disappointment in the performance of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. There is no sector in which this UNC government has distinguished themselves, certainly not in a positive light. And we have to reflect on the external relations and foreign affairs sector as being one of those in which they've really tarnished the reputation of Trinidad and Tobago significantly, and I dare say consistently. The most recent debacle being the Prime Minister's atrocious and shameful performance at the CARICOM Heads of Government Conference in St. Kitts recently. But taking a theme from the Honorable Penelope Beckles-Robinson, I want to take you back to the 1st of May 2025, when this country swore in a brand new Prime Minister who had these words to offer the nation. And I'm quoting, "My highest priority will be not just to communicate with you, but to commune with you. I will never be detached from your feelings and aspirations. I will never do my own thing while the country cries out. I will always be listening. I will be following you." Well, the Prime Minister subsequently, in the last 10 months, went on to defy herself and to make a mockery of her commitment to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. If you look at what the Prime Minister delivered on that CARICOM speech last week, all right-thinking citizens have expressed dismay. She began those remarks with disrespect demonstrated to the Secretary General of the Caribbean Community, the very distinguished Carla Barnett, not even recognizing the head of the Secretariat in her remarks. She went on to take matters that would best be determined and resolved behind closed doors, matters between herself and the distinguished Prime Minister of Barbados, and projected that on the regional stage in a most controversial and disparaging manner, resulting in what? Open discord and rebuttal from Prime Minister Motley, well within her right to respond publicly to those very inappropriate and reckless comments. And now we're seeing rebuttals and refutations from other actors within the domestic space, such as former commissioners of police, just really lowering the image and standard of Trinidad and Tobago within our region and making a mockery, or trying to make a mockery of the good work that had been done by those who preceded her in office. So you cannot imagine a Prime Minister who is more detached from the feelings and aspirations of the people of this country. And who are the people of this country? We are a peaceful people. We believe in justice. We have a heart, and we're known for our hospitality and our humanity. Do those words describe the Prime Minister's assault against the Republic of Cuba? Do those words describe the Prime Minister's endorsement and celebration of a siege against the Republic of Cuba at this time? Again, trampling on the reputation and the legacy of all of those who preceded her. And I continually give the example of Basdeo Pandey, who stood up. He had many faults and many areas in which we disagree with him. But on the aspect of regional solidarity, he was an example to Kamla Persad-Bissessar. In the aspect of solidarity with the Cuban people and treating with the basic human dignity and requirements of food and fuel, he distinguished himself compared to his very unfortunate successor, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, who went to CARICOM, a space in which the Cuban people have always found comfort and solidarity and a recognition of their basic humanitarian needs. And we heard our Prime Minister, the representative of our people, the standard bearer, according to her, of our aspirations, going and celebrating the siege and making a mockery of issues such as democracy, calling for the provision of free and fair multi-party elections before they can power their electrical grid. And what hypocrisy, when at the same time I was very heartened that many citizens have been reflecting that a number of the countries that we work very closely with and do business very closely with do not have what she described as free and fair multi-party elections, and that is not an inhibition for our bilateral relations. So the Prime Minister went there. Those were talking points not scripted or drafted in Port of Spain, not scripted or drafted by the people of Trinidad and Tobago. They were alien to us, imported into this country, delivered by a Prime Minister who has no respect for the sovereignty of Trinidad and Tobago, has no respect for the international reputation of this country. I say that without fear of contradiction. You look at the issue of our relations with our nearest neighbor, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Much heat and rhetoric and expenditure of social media to engage in hostility raising of temperature time and time again during the last 10 months. You had this opposition standing here week after week, warning the government, you are on the wrong course. This is not a productive course with which to pursue anything that can be described as diplomacy. And where are we left today with those relations? As we speak, you have a prime minister of our country who is still persona non grata in Venezuela. And when the head of your cabinet is persona non grata, what does that mean for the rest of your ministers? And we've issued the challenge, which of them can pick up the phone this morning and speak to their counterparts on any sector or any matter of importance and interest to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, which can go for a meeting and engage with their counterparts and further our interests. So if that is the road the Prime Minister and the government have put us on, what exactly are the rewards and results for the people of this country? We have not, our interests have not been advanced. They have been set back significantly in every single sector. The Prime Minister has indicated with great pride that she's off to another summit. So after many months staying at home, hiding from the media, not addressing the population, not receiving questions, she's on a little bit of a summit run at this point. So soon off to Miami for the Shield of the Americas Summit. We take no issue with the Prime Minister engaging with important hemispheric partners and others. We take no issue with that. The points being made by the opposition are not anti-American points. They are pro-Trinidad and Tobago points. And there are many aspects, the majority of aspects, in which we see eye to eye with our partners in Washington, D.C. There are other aspects in which we see eye to eye with our European friends, our Canadian friends, or our Chinese friends, our friends in India, in Brazil, and all of these partners. Some of them don't get along well with each other, but they all respect the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. They respect our sovereign voice, our ability to negotiate and to carry the standards and values of our people. If we negate all of that, we mute our sovereign voice and we adopt the talking points and views of one or two of them, what we are doing is taking a position of convenience, sacrificing our principles as a country. And the question has to be, to what end? I'm here to say and to remind the people of this country that positions of convenience in international affairs do not serve the interests of your people. They never achieve the desired results. And what happens, and what has happened before, is that when circumstances change elsewhere, you are left in the lurch. Let me just briefly remind you about the zone of peace, which our senior council prime minister continues to struggle with in a most wretched fashion. She has mangled the issue of zone of peace. She's misconstrued, misunderstood it. And we really have to question maybe her capacity to understand what the zone of peace is about. So I want to take you back to the year 1979, which was the origin of this Caribbean zone of peace, offered at the Organization of American States, the OAS, by Grenada, by Little Grenada, a small island country that had and has gone through a lot, offering to us in the Caribbean region some basic principles that govern not domestic crime on the streets of your capital or the homicide rate or who's selling drugs in a particular village or town, which governs, those rules govern the relations between countries that are touched by the Caribbean Sea. And those principles were important in 1979 and are also important today. And that resolution at the OAS was taken up by CARICOM, it was taken up by CELAC, it was taken up by the Association of Caribbean States, and has has been one of the areas that has found solidarity right across the region. One country, and one country only in the Caribbean, has extracted itself not just to a position of ambivalence, but to where our Prime Minister is consistently attacking and denigrating the zone of peace. Why has she been doing this? Why did she go to the United Nations and attack the zone of peace? Why did she go to CARICOM? I mean, what a forum to choose to do that and attack the zone of peace. Why is she continuing those projections? Why is she endorsing a war 12,000 kilometers away in the Middle East? Those are valid questions, and citizens have been asking those questions. There's a view that if you support a zone of peace, that would be inconsistent with the mobilization of a foreign armada in our waters. That armada has come, and that armada has gone. The justification then was it will give us a bonus with respect to crime reduction. And 1 week ago, our Prime Minister told the CARICOM region and leaders that the reason we had a 42% reduction in homicides was because of the presence of foreign military in the Caribbean. That was her justification. And now 1 week later, she has imposed a state of emergency on the people of Trinidad and Tobago in lieu of a crime plan. Taking you back again to our Prime Minister committing to always follow the aspirations of the people of this country and to commune and connect with the people of this country. You have a leader of the opposition, tireless, week after week, standing here in this space before these microphones, presenting herself and inviting questions consistently. Members of the media, where is your Prime Minister? Where is our Prime Minister? It has been over 8 months now. I have checked. Every other head of government in this region has had multiple media conferences and engagements during that period. Every single one, except Kamla Persad Bissessa. This is unacceptable. This cannot continue. And even today, when she's making history in all the wrong ways, imposing yet another state, perpetual state of emergency on the people of this country, she's once again missing in action. Every sector has been damaged and tarnished by this government, and unfortunately, our external relations sector is among the worst of them. Just to briefly touch, we find ourselves in the middle of Ramadan and in the middle of the Lenten season. Much heralded at the beginning by social media releases from the same Prime Minister and all of these government ministers. We wish the people a season of peace and humanity and compassion and so on. And within hours of a military bombardment being initiated in the Middle East, you have a series of media releases from the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs endorsing and celebrating the bombardment and not focusing on our business, our interests. The first priority must always be the welfare and safety of our people, some of whom right now, as we're in this comfortable space, are hiding and cowering in fear in bomb shelters and basements, not knowing where to turn. Again, I'm sure if the Prime Minister presented herself today, the media would have asked her, have you used these alleged new alliances and strong friendships to make arrangements for emergency repatriation, extraction, evacuation, and channels of escape for our people, or students, or petrochemical workers, or teachers who exist in countries affected around the Persian Gulf? I can tell you she has not done so. The ministry has not done so. They are failing in their responsibility while at the same time clearly pursuing interests that are alien to the people of this country. Thank you very much. Look forward to your questions at some stage.
Thank you very much, Senator Dr. Amory Brown, for highlighting the mishaps in terms of our external relations due to the actions, inactions, and statements of our Prime Minister. Now, regarding energy, we've had some misinformation in the public domain, and to correct some of that misinformation and put the credit where it needs to be put, we now welcome the Honorable Stuart Young, SC.
Thank you, Hans. To the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Political Leader of the People's National Movement, the Honourable Penelope Beckles. Good morning. So I have come here this morning really to have a brief discussion with Trinidad and Tobago about the energy sector, because of course one of the effects of the Middle East crisis that is taking place right now deals directly with the global energy sector, and in particular oil and gas, in a fairly unprecedented manner. The first implication we're seeing is with global energy prices. You have the price of oil and the price of gas, and in particular with the price of oil, the global benchmark really is Brent, and we are seeing the prices of Brent being driven up to between $83 and $84 a barrel today as we sit here. But of course, the effects we will get to on Trinidad and Tobago. Now, with respect to the price of gas, what we had happen yesterday was attacks on the largest LNG processing facility in the world, which is actually in Qatar, and that has led to a shutdown of that facility. And that facility alone, Qatar alone, produces 20% of the world's LNG supplies. That is hugely significant, and this has never happened in the global markets of liquefied natural gas. How does that affect Trinidad and Tobago? Another effect of this, of course, as you would all know by now, is the Strait of Hormuz, which is now under attack, and you have tankers, well, it's not under attack, but you have tankers taking the conscious decisions to press pause, etc. And that alone is responsible for about 20 million barrels of oil and refined fuel product a day. So that immediately leads to driving up of prices of oil and refined products. And when we say refined products, these are, for example, the fuels that are used to power your vehicles, diesel, and other supplies like that are now become under threat. We are living in a time where these prices are going to affect us. Global shipping is also being affected, so there is now discussion going on globally with respect to inflation of goods and inflation of costs that will drive up the cost of living, not only here in Trinidad and Tobago, but even in places like Europe, the developed world, China, the Far East, etc. So these are some of the effects. How does it affect us directly, and in particular our energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago? What does it mean for us? Well, the first thing is, and you heard the government sheepishly refer to it within the last 48 hours, Atlantic LNG, which is now a 3-train facility producing liquefied natural gas. Fortunately for Trinidad and Tobago, the PNM administration spent 5 long, hard years in very complex commercial negotiations, culminating in December of 2023, where for the first time in the world, it was a global achievement, the PNM administration managed to restructure the shareholding and the arrangements of an LNG facility. And that was achieved in December 2023. And thankfully, some of the benefits of that are the pricing formula that we actually got to apply to certain gas contracts from 2019, where we are now going to receive higher prices for some of the natural gas in Trinidad and Tobago using a formula, a basket that uses a price mechanism from Asia, a price mechanism from Europe, which, by the way, yesterday, because of the shutdown of the Qatar facility, their prices rose by over 50%. So it's a third JKM, which is the Japanese Korean marker, which has also risen and today is at over $13 compared to the American marker Henry Hub, which is at $3. So immediately one marker is at 13. The European marker has risen by over 50% yesterday. And then we also worked in a component of Brent, a third. So that too. So our LNG prices, we will get better prices. We also managed to restructure and renegotiate shareholding in trains 2 and 3, where the people of Trinidad and Tobago previously had absolutely no shareholding. And in addition to that, to get cargoes from trains 2 and 3 and 4. So we now have a 10% shareholding. So interestingly, the incompetent chairman of the NGC yesterday rushed and was quick to tell the media he had an emergency meeting and called in Atlantic LNG to meet with NGC to, of course, try and get some of the benefits of cargoes and gas in Trinidad going into this LNG. But what is happening is right now one of the trains at Atlantic LNG is down, as I understand it, for emergency repair that wasn't planned. And then there is a planned turnaround and repairs and maintenance to be done to train 4. These things cannot be put off. So him coming out and beating his incompetent chest as usual, and to say that NGC is putting pressure on Atlantic to have all 3 trains running, do not by doing so cause and create an industrial disaster, because you don't play. This is not a Lego set that you think it is. You cannot play with the safety of these plants that require the maintenance that has been scheduled. Any offset of that can have disastrous consequences to our Atlantic LNG facilities, and I caution the incompetent chairman of the NGC against pushing that into happening. But fortunately, the good news for us is that the restructuring done and culminating in December 2023 is going to have direct benefits both on the gas prices, as I've just indicated, as well as our positioning on cargoes. But it must not be done at the expense and the safety of this plant. The UNC government has shown consistently since last year, when they've taken over the government, that they know nothing about the energy sector. And now this is just another example where they may be driving us into a dangerous place. But fortunately, the professionals and the major shareholders, who too will want to benefit, Shell is the largest trader of LNG in the world, and then BP as well, who will benefit. Both of them have 45% in Atlantic LNG. They will not compromise and should not compromise the safety of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular those in Point Fortin, where any disaster with LNG would be humongous and lives could be lost. The mismanagement continues, of course, with NGC, and these prices that are going to be rising, because right now NGC are in negotiations with our petchem stakeholders. Fortunately, I see the Minister of Energy hustled and had a meeting with Nutrien yesterday, which, by the way, is still shut down. So we have lost hundreds of millions of US dollars from this facility being shut down, an advanced, sophisticated facility that produces nitrate and ammonia being shut down now for months. The others who are in current negotiations with NGC are facing a dilemma, because the prices again being demanded by the incompetent chairman of the NGC without the approval, is my understanding, of the Minister of Energy, is driving Trinidad and Tobago's producers, the off-takers of gas from NGC, into very uncompetitive situations where their pricing now is out of whack and they are going to make losses. And if they don't understand this, what it will lead to is further shutdowns of plants. And the narrow-minded thought process, well, the extra molecules of gas can now go into Atlantic LNG, driving out the petchem producers in Trinidad and Tobago. This is what is going on at our industrial estate. So as these prices go up, unfortunately, with respect to the restructuring of Atlantic LNG and in particular the pricing, you do the comparison, because the prices that would have been in play even up to today would have been the Henry Hub price, a flat figure of $3, which has actually risen in the past few weeks and marginally risen in a few days, because of course this is American pricing. Henry Hub at $3 compared to the basket I've just described, which is at $13 for the Asian market. US dollars, all of these prices are in, over 50% rise with respect to the European markets, and an $83 to $84 price per barrel of oil with the Brent component. The other topic to deal with today very briefly is cross-border gas. It is clear to any person observing what has been happening in Trinidad and Tobago that ironically and hypocritically, all of Kamala Persad-Bissessa's eggs are now in the dragon basket. That is clear. You will recall when she first came in at her swearing-in ceremony and that of her cabinet in May last year, it was dragon was dead with much glee and aplomb. But shortly thereafter, coming to the realization that Trinidad and Tobago requires cross-border gas from Venezuela to keep our gas industries going. And again, not a single new project has come on in our domestic gas market. Not even that negotiation with Perenco of new gas, which was expected, and the pricing. All of that is the work of the previous administration. And before I move off of the Atlantic LNG point, you would recall again that Kamala Persad-Bissessa and Munilal were two of the loudest voices attacking the PNM administration whilst we were negotiating that, where they're now claiming the benefits and happy for the benefits, attacking that with the travel that was taking place when we traveled to London, The Hague, and Houston to conclude negotiations that had never been done anywhere else in the world, as well as attacking us for Train 1, which was always a strategic part of our conversation and negotiations. And I will remind the people of Trinidad and Tobago, not a cent was lost by NGC or the government with respect to Train 1, because we managed to recover all of that and more in the restructuring arrangements. With respect to cross-border gas, all of Kamala Persad-Bissessa's eggs are in the dragon basket. So again, it is to remind the population, this was a conceived idea brought to fruition by the PNM administration. Between 2010 and 2015, absolutely nothing was done by Trinidad and Tobago with respect to Dragon. It was not pursued, and it was when we came in 2016, we made it a reality. Again, culminating with a 30-year license from the Venezuelan government in December 2023, as well as several OFAC licenses with respect to it. So all that is being claimed now is of no moment whatsoever. But a major difference is that the Trinidad and Tobago government and NGC are not sitting at the table with the negotiations, and they are leaving it completely up to the multinational oil and gas companies. So when you look at OFAC license, the general license number 50, you do not see NGC. You do not see the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The previous OFAC license that we had negotiated and obtained was strategically done in the name of the government of Trinidad and Tobago to allow us to control the negotiations, the discussions, and the decisions. That is the only way you will get the best price for gas that is coming to Trinidad and Tobago. The license now has Shell and BP. We saw clearly last week, as I've been warning the country, the executives of Shell at Miraflores, with the president of Venezuela acting, Delcy Rodriguez, who this government cannot even talk to, and Shell driving the negotiations for Dragon gas, presumably Loran and other gas fields. The UNC has done nothing of significance or relevance, and they are not sitting at the table. So if this gas eventually comes, it is not going to come at the best benefit to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, including allocation of gas, because that is something we were always concerned about, to make sure that whilst a percentage goes to LNG, other percentages of that gas come to make electricity in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as supply petchem. But if you're not sitting at the table and you're persona non grata in Venezuela, and up to this moment, even though the President of the United States refers to the President of Venezuela as Delcy Rodriguez, you cannot even speak to her. You cannot even acknowledge her as President. Where does that leave Trinidad and Tobago? And that has us in the People's National Movement very concerned for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I've heard a narrative, we have heard a narrative in the past couple of days about, well, Loran Manatee was the work of the UNC government. Complete rubbish. In 2010 to 15, they signed a unitization agreement, which means the Loran Manatee field had to be developed together with Venezuela. If that remained in play today, there would be no Manatee project. They never moved it. They were unable to. They could not get anywhere. We came in, and it was in 2018, 2019, we managed to achieve, as a result of our diplomatic and respectful relations with Venezuela, the deunitization of Manatee, and that is what is keeping Trinidad and Tobago's hope alive right now, because Manatee is being developed, the work is taking place, and that is only because the PNM administration managed to deunitize it and to carve out Manatee from Loran. So do not let the false narratives take over the conversation. Absolutely nothing positive has taken place by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. We've never even seen this 6-month permit of OFAC that I believe is close to expiry if it hasn't already expired. And that is because they are not at the table. They are not having the negotiations and conversations. Our Prime Minister, unfortunately, is persona non grata in Venezuela. And it is Shell and BP who are pursuing these conversations on their own behalves. Fortunately, we have the resources in Trinidad and Tobago to process the gas. These are some of the matters that have us particularly concerned. The last thing I'll address is recently on our interview with the media, the chairman of NGC tried to attribute the collapse of NGC and losses to NGC to the PNM administration. Any accountant looking at the accounts with you will quickly show you, as we said in Parliament numerous times, it's there on the Hansard. I've also said it previously at public meetings. The losses that NGC made in the previous years are directly attributable to the disastrous one contract the UNC negotiated in 2010 to 2015, the CGCL contract that cost Trinidad and Tobago via NGC billions of dollars in losses and continues to cost. And then, of course, impairments of the assets. So it is completely, again, false information. And to say that you inherited a disastrous gas sector, completely false again, because every single gas project coming on stream now, every single one, was the policy of the previous PNM administration and negotiated by the previous PNM administration. Gas price contracts that are now being agreed with Perenco and with EOG for Mento and Perenco for their acquisition of the Woodside and the BP assets, that is par for the course. But it is coming from what we envisaged, what we negotiated, and what we settled and are granted in the Mento project and in the Perenco acquisition of Woodside's assets as well as BP's assets, Touchstone with Central Block, etc. So whilst there is some reprieve to be had with these increasing global energy prices in oil and gas, and thankfully the restructuring of Atlantic LNG that was criticized, attacked, and undermined by the UNC in the period 2018 to 2023 when we were doing it. Fortunately, we should get some extra revenue from there. Fuel prices are going to increase. The cost of shipping goods worldwide is going to be affected as well. We are sharing our concerns today with the cross-border gas and the lack of the government and NGC being at the table in critical negotiations taking place. These are not going to augur well for Trinidad and Tobago. And those are the issues that I've come to raise with you on behalf of the opposition, and to alert you and to put down the markers, as well as some explanation as to what is going on in the Middle East right now, how it affects global energy prices, and in particular, how it affects us positively, and also with some caution here in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Member of Parliament for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West. Members of the media, we will now have your questions. As usual, we will have the microphone circulated, and you can simply identify the media house which you represent and let us know who you would like to post your question to in terms of the members of Parliament that are currently present. So we just ask that you raise your hand and let us know that you would like to ask a question. We'll start with Renessa Cutting today.
Thank you. Good morning. Is the opposition satisfied that the conditions for an SOE are met? And if not, is the opposition prepared to bring some sort of challenge?
We'll ask Keith Scotland SC to answer that question.
The leader of the opposition had made it pellucidly clear that if the basis of this incarnation of the state of emergency is gang activity, we ask, and we are asking this question responsibly. There's the anti-gang legislation that has been in place for now more than 5 years. How many persons have been charged under the anti-gang legislation? If there's credible evidence, bring it forward. There's no such evidence that has been brought forward to the opposition. There's no credible data, because the proof will be in the charging, because you'd have identified the persons, you'd have identified the gangs that they're involved in, and you bring a charge. That being said, the opposition is very, very wary, and that is why I take the cue from the honorable leader of the opposition and say that this needs some serious interrogation, not just by us, but media, for you to see how many persons have been charged under the anti-gang legislation, which exists out with the state of emergency. And the last SOE. How many persons? The answer is, it's zero. Zero. So where are these gang persons? They exist as ghosts. So we are very, very concerned, and to be responsible, and I don't in any way want to fetter the honorable leader of the opposition, but I take the cue from her. We have serious disquiet and misgivings about this new incarnation of the state of emergency, and we see it as an indolent effort, as a crime plan.
When they first implemented the SOE, they did make reference to some high-ranking officials being under threat. Was the opposition ever given any information, any details as to this threat? And also, was any opposition member ever on the list of persons who are said to be under threat?
That is a question that you would, well, certainly from the point of view of the leader of the opposition, we have not received, we were not provided with any such information, and maybe you ought to ask the persons who have the answers in their bosoms, what are these, and you may ask also who are the two senators who sought, bribes. You can ask that question too. It will be legitimate.
Good day, everyone. Kimray Fletcher, Guardian Media Limited. Now, I know it was mentioned today that an increasing gang activity is the reason for the SE, but in addition to gang activity, crime continues to plague Trinidad and Tobago. The opposition has made it clear that they are not in support, or that the government has failed to address the crime situation, right? So my question to the opposition today is, are you calling for the resignation of the Minister of Homeland Security, or the Prime Minister, or anyone, for not addressing the crime situation, or the failure to address the crime situation in the opposition's view?
I will ask the honorable leader of the opposition to answer that.
The government had a press conference as I said, around 9 o'clock, taking absolutely no questions. And that is a concern that we have. So when you ask about, listen, this is not, it's not a question of resignation, and resignation is a question of the government, as the Honorable Stuart Young said. They clearly cannot do the job that they claimed that they could do. And it is very important. I mean, a state of emergency, when a government takes that decision, every citizen believes that it's not taken lightly. The Attorney General has himself put out a press release. And whether it was the 2011 or whether it's the past two, I mean, none of us, if you say you have evidence that came to light recently, which is what they're saying. In other words, the Prime Minister is saying a meeting was held last night, and the Commissioner of Police clearly, from what the Prime Minister said, brought to the national security meeting certain information, recent information, and based on that information, a state of emergency was called. Now, if you recall, as was the question was asked, a couple months ago, on the media, it was the several ministers, it was members of the judiciary, and other persons. Yes, and certain buildings were being targeted. And I mean, based on that, I mean, an opposition would be irresponsible not to support. But a couple months later, if you say to the public and to the world that you have all this information, I mean, if a commissioner of police comes and says that they are threatening the life of judges and they're threatening the life of ministers, and if you recall, I remember the front page of a Guardian article, they gave details about following certain ministers. So you come again today and you say you have all this information about gang activity. But I want to, the Honorable Stuart Young was just pointing out something to me. And so too was MP Scotland. I want to beg and plead with the media, please look at these regulations. Because you see, it is one thing to say to the public that you are calling a state of emergency, is another thing when people don't read these regulations, because here the regulations would tell you that this government really is not practicing democracy. This government is all about dictatorship. This government is all about abuse of power. And this government is all about ensuring that freedom of expression no longer exists in Trinidad and Tobago. This is what this SOE is all about. Because when you look at Section 11 again, and I want to say to several persons, including the media, because you notice they're talking about articles. I mean, who are they targeting when you talk about articles? No person shall endeavor, whether orally or otherwise, to influence public opinion in a manner likely to be prejudicial to public safety, do any act or have any article in his possession with a view to making or facilitating the making of any such endeavor. And we're talking about gang activity, but you see what is in these regulations? And then they go on to say, notwithstanding any rule of law to the contrary, a police officer may, without a warrant, and with or without assistance, and with the use of force if necessary, enter and search any premises, or stop and search any vehicle or individual, whether in a public place or not. I mean, listen, we could go on and on and on, you know, because we cannot separate the regulations from the policy. And you are talking about anti-gang legislation. And I mean, we have to link 2011 again, because you remember in 2011 you had hotspots, and that is the time when it appeared to be even worse than today, when they brought that state of emergency. You lock up over 8,000 people. I mean, if you remember, they had vans going all over the place, just putting people all over into these vehicles, and then lo and behold, millions and millions of dollars were paid out. I am just urging the public, because we are going to have a meeting to deal with this issue of this legislation, and to deal with these emergency regulations, because it is very, very clear that the public needs to be aware exactly what is the intentions. Because we know, I mean, we have been listening to the ministers warning people about social media and about what you say and what you didn't say. And we also recall that one of the persons who was arrested and kept in custody. So we have to pay attention to the regulations. A person who commits an offense under these regulations is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $100,000 and to imprisonment for a term of 5 years. So I want to say, and you go back to the Prime Minister's statement. I also indicated that violent gang members would be returned straight to prison. And this time, their friends and family who aid their criminality would accompany them. I reiterate my words that if criminals want to terrorize law-abiding citizens and their families, I will do everything legally possible to terrorize criminals and those who aid and abet them. The law is not about terrorizing, This is still a democracy. This is still a democracy. And this is a country with a rule of law. And this is a prime minister who believes that you govern by telling people behave yourself. Behave yourself. This is not about behaving yourself. We agree that if legislation, and sometimes drastic legislation, and the anti-gang legislation was not a legislation that when the People's National Movement passed it, we understood that is not, in a sense, you have to do certain things, because when crime is getting out of hand, and that's why we talk about the willingness of the opposition to assist. When things are getting out of hand, the country expects the opposition and the government to come together if it is necessary to pass the appropriate legislation in the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But this thing about behave yourself, I've said it over and over. This country is not no kindergarten that you're talking about behave yourself. The expectation is if you are leading, you lead in a way where people recognize that there is a democracy, there's a rule of law, there's a parliament, and that when we designed the parliament with the Senate and with independent senators is because the objective was to ensure that no government could just do what they want. And that's the purpose of it. So that when you want to say to the public, you have UNC Senate, independent senators, and the president, is a low functionary, PNM. It is to tell the public, it is a way of what you call reverse psychology, to putting people in a particular position where they almost against the opposition and feel that the opposition does not want to support the government. We maintain our position. We are willing at any point in time to cooperate, to collaborate with the government when they bring good legislation. And I know there were a couple additional issues on the that Stuart you wanted to mention. Yeah, well, just on this, I'll come back. I'm right here.
Sorry, just briefly on the regulations, right? Because of course the regulations are what you must turn to for the flesh of how the government intends to operationalize the state of emergency. And when you do a side-by-side comparison between the 2026 regulations, the 2024 regulations in December 2024, as well as the 2025, which is what the UNC put in place, there are some stark and dangerous differences. Look at Regulation 4, which is now permitting orders to be made by the President under Regulation 3, which is really giving the Commissioner of Police the power to put in place certain orders, right? And Regulation 4 is to now concretize it by making orders to the President. So, but look importantly at Regulation 4.1b. The government is telling us, the people and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, that they foresee the possibility of putting in place an order to impose on any person any restrictions in respect of his employment or business, in respect of his place of residence. What is that? Is this their attempt to go zozo using a state of emergency? So they are going to put in place orders that would restrict any one of us. And remember, your constitutional rights under a state of emergency, such as habeas corpus, such as going to court to be released, etc., are suspended. And they are now coming and telling us, the population, listen, we are contemplating imposing on any person any restrictions in respect of his employment or business, in respect of your place of residence, and in respect of your association or communication with other persons. That is a huge red flag. And now putting here as well that you may be required to notify of your movements in such manner, at such time, to such authority or persons as may be specified. That previously was an order of the court. They are now completely getting rid of due process. Another one at E, to restrict any person from traveling except in accordance with permission given to him by such authority or person as may be specified, without identifying. Again, taking away the previous powers constitutionally that have been put into the courts of Trinidad and Tobago and handing that to themselves, handing that to Roger Alexander, handing that to Kamla Prasad Bisesa. Is this where this government is taking us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago? So don't fall into the complacency as is happening and the numbness that, oh, is another state of emergency, but there are no curfew, so it's not going to affect us. The regulations are indicating to us with neon lights in highlight, with bright, bright red flags, that they are contemplating some very far overreaching trampling on our constitutionally protected rights of freedom of movement, freedom of expression. The opposition leader and my colleague, MP Keith Scotland, Senior Counsel, have alluded to one that has us concerned, the Regulation 11. There's no need for me to go there any further. But what we're highlighting, look in particular at these regulations, number 4, and see where they're indicating they can take this country. And remember, because everyone thinks this has to apply and only applies to criminals. Who determines a criminal? It's supposed to be a court of law. But under a state of emergency, anyone of us could fall prey to this. As we saw the social media blogger detained under the last state of emergency under that same Regulation 11, if you want an indication of where this government is prepared to go. Thank you.
MP Young, you're a former Minister of National Security. You just mentioned Roger Alexander. Are you calling for the resignation of Roger Alexander as the Homeland Security Minister?
That question was put to the leader of the opposition, and I'm putting it to you. And she quite skillfully and diplomatically answered. I personally don't think that he should be in position and post. And that is the position this party, our position is that what we are seeing is the most incompetent government across the board, not limited to Roger Alexander alone. You're seeing it in the energy sector. You're seeing it in many other areas. So I stand with the leader of the opposition's answer, but there is no sensible person in Trinidad and Tobago. He's very diplomatic, but there is no sensible person in Trinidad and Tobago who wants what is best for Trinidad and Tobago, that is comfortable with the current Minister of Homeland Security.
So what do you have to say about persons that will be saying, well, over the last, while in government for 10 years, the country recorded its highest crime rates, and now within 10 months the government is now trying to manage the crime situation by having an SOE, and it's a bit hypocritical that the opposition is calling out the government for doing so.
Not at all. Every government that is in power, whether it be in Trinidad and Tobago, whether it be in St. Kitts and Nevis, whether it be in Jamaica, whether it be in United States, whether it be in United Kingdom, one of their responsibilities is to deal with crime and criminality. There is no country in the world that is not grappling with crime and criminality. We are no different in Trinidad and Tobago. So starting premise is every government has to deal with it. You've heard up to a few moments ago the leader of the opposition say that as the opposition, we are prepared to work with you. We are prepared to sit down, look at pieces of legislation that may assist the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We struggled at times over the last 10 years because of the position of the UNC government, refusing to support bail amendments, refusing to support anti-gang legislation, which are beneficial in the fight against crime. So there's no hypocrisy in us pointing out. Go and see if the PNM had those measures to shut down you in your workplace, to shut down you in your residence, to come after you, to say, well, you're a social media blogger, so I am coming to search your premises without a warrant, to arrest you without a warrant, to put you under preventative detention order. We are not saying no to fight against crime, you know. We are saying don't abuse people's constitutional rights and don't for a minute normalize the use of states of emergency. A state of emergency is the last resort. There is nothing after a state of emergency. And when that fails in the fight against crime, as it has shown to fail, as the questions asked by the leader of the opposition and MP Scotland, which remain unanswered, how many charges came out of the last state of emergency? A minister sits in his office and issues a preventative detention order for you, a member of the media, and they cart you off and put you somewhere your family can't see you, your lawyers can't get a habeas corpus. Was he charged, or at the end of the state emergency, were you just let out for your lawyers now to bring a constitutional action against the state and get damages? And that is what this opposition is concerned about.
So how does the opposition feel about the Prime Minister praising Marco Rubio when she went to the summit for the reduction in crime in the country, and then days later calling an SOE?
The opposition leaders already highlighted that the hypocrisy that we've seen, that on one occasion saying, look, crime is down due to the effects of the actions that the United States government took in the region, and then returning a few days later and saying, listen, we're under siege, using the same examples they used before for the calling of a state of emergency. And that is what the opposition is warning about. Do not normalize and roll over after roll over, because it is clear that the UNC's only crime plan is a state of emergency.
Yeah. An opposition leader, you mentioned, okay, sure.
Continue from what Stuart was saying. I want to remind you that the Honorable Kamala Prasad-Bissessar said that a state of emergency declaration is a shameless political gimmickry. Let's remember that.
Under Band-Aid.
Under Band-Aid, okay? Because the Prime Minister was saying at the time that when you, in calling the state of emergency, in Dr. Rowley calling the state of emergency, it is a Band-Aid. But let me just also quote from the Prime Minister. May 1st. 6 months from today, under the UNC government, you will be in a safer and happier place in Trinidad and Tobago. I ask the people of Trinidad and Tobago, are you safer? Are you happier? You will see what happens when a government cares. We will work to make you and your lives better. That is our promise to you. We have done it before. Some may have treated the problems, some may have treated the people of our land like problems, but I know that the people of our land are the solution. We have a real plan, and we are ready to deliver. And I can go on. Yes?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned working with the government, and I know MP Scotland mentioned the blame game, the government blaming the opposition blaming government, etc. But do you have plans to approach the government to sit down and share any recommendations for a crime plan, a national strategic crime plan?
The day I was sworn in, on that day, I made it clear about my willingness to work with the government. So, and if you recall, this is not both under Dr. Keith Rowley as well as under Mr. Patrick Manning. There were overtures to the government, if you recall, under Mr. Manning. There was actually a committee set up. There were members at that time of the UNC, and under Dr. Rowley, there were also persons that were nominated. So we are available. It is similar to the Zoso bill. I mean, in the Zoso bill, We had several amendments. It wasn't a question where we did not want to support the legislation, but we felt, listen, there are some amendments that we feel is necessary to pass the legislation. The government's position, before they even heard from one member of the opposition or one member of the independent bench, the government's position is we are not going to be taking any amendment under consideration. And when you do that, you give the clear impression that you don't want to listen to the opposition. So as I said, or the independent. So as I said, we are willing to work with the government. You can't go to CARICOM and boast about reduction and all of that. And you can't in January, you give out all sorts of awards and you say, listen, things are going well, serious crimes are down. And have nothing to do with the state of emergency. It has to do with policing. And then a month later, you say, you absolutely need the state of emergency. Yes?
Because in your constituency, there was a murder last night. Someone was killed last night in Santa Rosa.
Yes.
So I just want to know maybe any response to that, because I know it was a popular businessman of a bookstore, Mr. Puran. I know obviously you would not have got time to visit your constituency.
No, I haven't visited, but I'm aware of it. I know him. I know exactly where it is. And therefore I have some information on it, and I want to express, of course, condolences to the family. And like every other MP who's sitting here, whether it's MP Young, MP Scotland, Senator Brown, who has also himself been a former MP. When it's close to home, because this is, you would recall I had one sometime last year of someone who was living in America, decided to come home, and there was an invasion. So it's always difficult for you in your constituency when these things happen, especially if you know the individual. And Santa Rosa Heights, that's where I lived as a teenager for a very long time. So I knew Santa Rosa Heights. That has been my home base. So you understand, and that's why we said it at the beginning, that as a responsible opposition, we know that we have a duty to assist the government dealing with crime. We also recognize that crime is a very complex issue. And it's not just the government, it's the church, it's the school, it's the NGOs. When you talk about consultation, and if you go back again to the Prime Minister speaking when she took her oath of office, she spoke about consultations, about talking with the public, with anybody who is willing to listen, anybody who has ideas. So at the end of the day, when you do not face the media and you do not give that kind of commitment to the public, so it's not just saying that you had a meeting last night and you got information. People also want to hear you. People want to hear questions because they understand that the press is going to ask the kind of difficult questions. And just as how we are all here, I've been saying it, the Prime Minister has a duty. Yes, you go on the 7th to have a meeting with the President of the United States, as you had a meeting with Mr. Rubio and came and said all these glittering things that now you're going to go to Venezuela. The Minister of Energy was going to go to Venezuela. That was last year. They haven't gone to no Venezuela. They haven't gone anywhere. All right? So it's not about just when you come back to put out these releases that we all do from time to time, put out releases, but you want to be able to face the press, who very often will ask the questions that the average member of the public wants to ask, but doesn't have the opportunity to ask.
Just switching topics, one last question. Our newsroom received reports of CPEP employees receiving more termination letters.
Yes. Well, again, I just read what the Prime Minister said. Once they are in office, you're going to be safer and you're going to be happier. We knew very well when they came with this, what I call even the recruitment drive. I said it recently, is a stunt. It's a sham. You say 50,000 jobs, right? And you talk about, when you're campaigning, you talk then about 20,000 jobs, and you give the impression to the public that, as I said, when UNC wins, everybody wins. But the CPEP worker, the reforestation worker, the URP worker, many persons who are on contracts who continue to lose their jobs, because the fact about it, we know that there is also a social issue. Yes. We know also that there is a social issue. And I'm sure you as members of the media, you are all over. I mean, the average person, I mean, Stuart can tell you in his constituency and Scotland that people come to you every day. Whether it be for Christmas, a lot of parents are not able to send their children home, send their children from home to school. A lot of children are remaining at home. So here it is. I'm sure absolutely nobody is surprised that they have sent home those CPEP workers. As a matter of fact, we said it. And it was just a game they were playing. I mean, you would recall, I mean, you saw all these pictures, thousands of people down in Central, and they are promising them that they're going to get jobs. And what happened? No jobs. So I say this to my incoming government members. However, if you treat the citizens with callousness, contempt, and corrupt ways, I guarantee you retribution will be swift and will be brutal. I hope people remember that statement. So at the end of the day, no surprises. No surprises. I mean, in my constituency, a number of the CPEP workers, I mean, up to when I had office, last week, Friday, I had office, and I mean, they're coming because they, especially the single mothers, they depended on those jobs. And if you recall, last week when I spoke, the Honorable Prime Minister referred to those jobs as slavery. All right? And the Prime Minister told members of the public that, you know, you're going to get something better. I mean, what of the CPEP workers? What is better for them? What is better for the URP workers? What is better for the reforestation workers? And all these promises that you have made. But we always knew in the PNM that they were not speaking the truth.
So just to touch back on this, the opposition is asking the citizenry to be on guard as it relates to the possible erosion of our rights.
Yes.
And raising very grave concerns as it relates to sections 4 and 11 of the regulations.
As well as other sections.
What is the opposition prepared to do, even legally, in terms of any challenge or anything?
Well listen, I said a while ago, we are going to have a public meeting. That's one. But we are also going to look close. I mean, we have just seen those regulations. And as MP Young said correctly, comparison between the previous legislation that was laid not too long ago and this legislation. And our clear position is that this particular state of emergency is directed specifically as it relates to the issue of freedom of movement and freedom of expression. And this is a government that does not want anybody to criticize them. That's what it is. I mean, whether it be on social media, whether it's to make a little TikTok, and the media as well. And, you know, as I close, let me say this, we have just finished the carnival season. Just as how they muted the mic of Helen Francis, they want to mute the mic of every single citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. That is what this is about.
Thank you very much, Leader, Opposition, members of Parliament, members of the media. We thank you for being here. Clearly, there's no plan for our vulnerable citizens, no plan for the energy sector, no plan in terms of foreign policy, and clearly no plan in terms of national security with this current administration. Trinidad and Tobago deserves better. Transparency matters, facts matter, and we, the opposition, will continue to hold the government to account and stand for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We thank you.
nobody to run. When I scope out my country, I walk by a gun. Ole, 'cause that is what they promise we. A lot's going on in the sun. So I come here to bring wisdom, so we don't burn down. We lovely society. See, a new government has the assignment to put we country into alignment. But every time they read us with their ego, it's the vulnerable who feeling that below. Lord, is it ignorance or is it arrogance? I don't know what to call it in this instance. Look at paradise right in front we eyes, but we still want to talk about who we despise.
Tell me where else can we go?
If we start to mash up the good things we know.
Tell me where else can we go?
If we treat we traditions like a Barbie show, you could fix everything on we island. Put gunships on we back like a tyrant. You could put 10 radars all up Scarborough. But don't forget,
this is Trinidad.
We love we freedom, and every citizen will agree that no oppression will be accepted by our Trini. We come from long days on the ground, working hard until daylight come, so we'll see it wrong to be a financial donkey. 'Cause every day we see a new taxation that causing a new kind of sufferation. And when you don't create that irritation, you send police to fix with desperation. Lord, where's the common sense? Where's the true intent to make you think oppression is relevant? Don't be shocked, my friend, when we start to bend and you see them placards in front of the parliament.
Tell me where else can we go?
If we little children are not free to grow.
Tell me where else can we go?
If they try to ban the words in the calypso, you could try to stop social media or the taping of police murders. You could rewrite a bill like this also. But don't forget, this is Trinidad. Take one look around. Even lingo and all could see confusions in tongue, and it's affecting everybody. Politicians and Facebook trolls, even Caisonians lost their role. The world's upside down, and I'm worried for my country. 'Cause every day I see victimization, racial and social aberration. We saying is love need to go wrong, but we spreading this thing like a toxin. Man, things getting so tense, some can't pay their rent, and the effect of this feeling permanent. But what scares me though, just so that you know, is the money we about to borrow.
Tell me where else can we go?
If the IMF start to pull we toe.
Tell me where else can we go?
If we toilet paper start to run too low, you could stress out the sea pepper worker. Take a fool and make him a leader. You could change every board 'cause it's your show. But don't forget, this is Trinidad. I know it's good intentions. We Prime Minister have your brutal measures would only cause rebellion in T&T, like what caused Cambule in times of old. And it's so the story unfold. It's that rebellion that give we people identity. So careful how you deal with we intellect, 'cause DNA remembers every aspect. Not every time we cry it's just politics. Your mind could start to play you some dirty tricks. Look, remember that honor comes before minister, and that's why we give you so much power. So don't let us down and don't let us frown. We need to see our 360 turn around.
Tell me where else can we go?
If your promises start to look untrue,
Tell me where else can we go?
if your own voters losing trust in you, you could do what you want with what intent. You could bat up the independent bench. You could change the country that we once knew. But don't forget, this is Trinidad.
Our defending monarch,
Keelan Francis.
Don't forget.
And everybody in the surprise calypso, right?
Ladies and gentlemen.
All right, so let me know if you all hearing me now. Just let me know if you all are hearing me now. All right, let me know if you guys are hearing me, because this is very, very important. This is very, very important. And I want to make sure that you all are hearing me. All right, so let me know if you all are hearing me on the platform so that we could get into this discussion here today. I'm not going to be long with you. I'm not going to be long with you. All right, so let me know if you're all hearing me. Please let me know if you all are hearing me. Please let me know if you all are hearing me very well so that I will know what to do. All right, so let me know if you all hearing me. All right. So, as I was saying to you just now, and those of you who are now joining me, I just listened to the opposition press conference with the Honorable Penelope Beckles, Mr. Stuart Young, SC, and Mr. Keith Scotland, SC. And they would have pointed out some things to the nation about this SOE that I think will affect even our platform, Constructive Talk. That's why I have it in the background, Constructive Talk. Now listen to me carefully, Trinidad and Tobago, and those of you who are following wherever in the world you all are hearing me. This evening I'm going to have my father on, Commander Lindial, and I'm going to try to get Mr. Keith Scotland, SC, on the platform this evening for us to discuss this SOE and the statements made today by the opposition concerning this SOE. I want you all to listen now to the opposition leader and what she had to say about the SOE.
And so too was MP Scotland. I want to beg and plead with the media, please look at these regulations. Because you see, it is one thing to say to the public that you are calling a state of emergency, is another thing when people don't read these regulations, because here the regulations would tell you that this government really is not practicing democracy. This government is all about dictatorship. This government is all about abuse of power. And this government is all about ensuring that freedom of expression no longer exists in Trinidad and Tobago. This is what this SOE is all about. Because when you look at Section 11 again, and I want to say to several persons, including the media, because you notice they're talking about articles. I mean, who are they targeting when you talk about articles? No person shall endeavor, whether orally or otherwise, to influence public opinion in a manner likely to be prejudicial to public safety, do any act or have any article in his possession with a view to making or facilitating the making of any such endeavor. Are we talking about gang activity? But you see what is in these regulations? And then they go on to say, notwithstanding any rule of law to the contrary, a police officer may, without a warrant, and with or without assistance, and with the use of force if necessary, enter and search any premises, or stop and search any vehicle or individual, whether in a public place or not. I mean, listen, we could go on and on and on, you know, because we cannot separate the regulations from the policy. And you are talking about anti-gang legislation. And I mean, we have to link 2011 again, because you remember in 2011 you had hotspots, and that is the time when it appeared to be even worse than today, when they brought that state of emergency. You lock up over 8,000 people. I mean, if you remember, they had vans going all over the place, just putting people all over into these vehicles, and then lo and behold, millions and millions of dollars were paid out. I am just urging the public, because we are going to have a meeting to deal with this issue of this legislation and to deal with these emergency regulations, because it is very, very clear that the public needs to be aware exactly what is the intentions. Because we know, I mean, we have been listening to the ministers warning people about social media and about what you say and what you didn't say. And we also recall that one of the persons who was arrested and kept in custody. So we have to pay attention to the regulations. A person who commits an offense under these regulations is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $100,000 and to imprisonment for a term of 5 years. So I want to say, and you know, I mean, you go back to the Prime Minister's statement. I also indicated that violent gang members would be returned straight to prison. And this time, their friends and family who aid their criminality would accompany them. I reiterate my words that if criminals want to terrorize law-abiding citizens and their families, I will do everything legally possible to terrorize criminals and those who aid and abet them. The law is not about terrorizing, you know. This is still a democracy. This is still a democracy. And this is a country with a rule of law. And this is a Prime Minister who believes that you're governed by telling people behave yourself. Behave yourself. This is not about behaving yourself. We agree that if legislation, and sometimes drastic legislation, and the anti-gang legislation was not a legislation that
So, you just heard the opposition leader. You just heard what she had to say about the SOE and the regulations in the SOE. I want to ask you to join me this evening on Constructive Talk. I want to ask you to join me this evening on Constructive Talk, as I have some guests going to be coming on to talk about this SOE and the regulations that governs this SOE. We need to understand the Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension the world. What are we getting ourselves into? Are we under a democracy or are we under a theocracy? Are we being governed with a muzzle to our mouth where we cannot say how we feel, or are we being governed by I don't know. So join me 8:30 this evening. Join me 8:30 this evening and let me know how you feel. So you just heard the opposition leader, and she would have given her concerns. I want to also play for you Mr. Young. I want you to listen to the Honorable Stuart Young also, and what he had to say about these regulations. And Trinidad and Tobago, come on, you all need to wake up. You all need to wake up and see what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. So take a listen to MP Stuart Young, and he's also senior counsel, and some of his concerns about these regulations. Take a listen.
To the President. So, but look importantly at Regulation 4.1b. The government is telling us, the people and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, that they foresee the possibility of putting in place an order to impose on any person any restrictions in respect of his employment or business, in respect of his place of residence. What is that? Is this their attempt to go zozo using a state of emergency? So they are going to put in place orders that would restrict any one of us. And remember, your constitutional rights under a state of emergency, such as habeas corpus, such as going to court to be released, etc., are suspended. And they are now coming and telling us, the population, listen, we are contemplating imposing on any person any restrictions in respect of his employment or business, in respect of your place of residence, and in respect of your association or communication with other persons. That is a huge red flag. And now putting here as well that you may be required to notify of your movements in such manner, at such time, to such authority or persons as may be specified. That previously was an order of the court. They are now completely getting rid of due process. Another one at E, to restrict any person from traveling except in accordance with permission given to him by such authority or person as may be specified, without identifying. Again, taking away the previous powers constitutionally that have been put into the courts of Trinidad and Tobago and handing that to themselves, handing that to Roger Alexander, handing that to Kamla Prasad Bisesa. Is this where this government is taking us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago?
So again, to those of you who are locked on, this evening we're going to be looking at these two clips. This evening we're going to be talking to a lawyer. We're going to be talking to persons in concern who are concerned about what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. I want you to call me now if you're going to join us later. Call me on 464-7003, 464-7003, 464-7003. What is your thoughts? We are now under an SOE. And you heard some of the issues under the SOE. You heard some of the concerns by the opposition about this SOE. What do you have to say? What is your thoughts? How do you feel? How do you feel? 464-7003, 464-7003. What is your view? Want to hear your take on it? Really want to hear your take on this. So give me a call now. 464-7003, 464-7003. What is your talk? Constructive Talk is now seriously having to think about how we do our program. What's your thoughts? 464-7003. Anybody want to call in and share your view? 464-7003, 464-7003. Four 7003, 464-7003. Somebody sent a message. What are they saying? What is that person saying? Just now I'll tell you. I agree. Very disrespectful. Who is disrespectful? What is disrespectful? Calling and say, I don't understand what you mean. Who is very disrespectful? Am I very disrespectful? What is disrespectful? Anybody want to call in and tell me what If you believe, as a message, somebody message and said here that I agree, very disrespectful. What is very disrespectful? Anybody want to call in and say what is disrespectful? Hello, good evening. Good afternoon, sorry.
Yeah, good afternoon, Pastor. Pastor,
hold on, caller. Hold on, caller.
Yeah, Pastor, this government has no crime plan. There's no crime plan, and this SOE is to take our rights. The whole situation about this is to take our rights because the government have no crime plan. Nothing at all. Right? And my solution to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, let's come together and shut down the country. Nobody is to go out and ministries closed, hospital closed, every institution closed. Force the Prime Minister to call election and Patagogo because I cannot handle this government anymore. They have no crime plan, and this SOE is to take away our rights. Thank you, Pastor.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let's take another caller. Hello, good evening. Alright, sorry, I do remember it's not evening, it's afternoon. Alright, I do remember it's not evening, it's afternoon. So I'm taking your calls. Somebody sent a message. I don't know what they mean by what did they say, boy? I agree, very disrespectful. Okay. I don't know if it's me, if it's the government, but I think that this SOE is going to affect constructive talk. I don't know about you, but let's take this call. Hello, good afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yeah, Pastor Google, good afternoon. I'm just realizing what is going on back home. Another state of emergency. Is this the way this UNC government intend to run Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes.
They had all the answers. They had all the answers with the opposition. What happened now? What happened now? And I need to ask a question. Where is the Gully Prime Ministers? Where is the Gully Prime Minister, Ms. Kamala Prasad-Bissessar? Why is she hiding? Where is the Prime Minister? How come isn't this part of the Prime Minister's job to come out and address the nations? Address the nation, the people of Trinidad and Tobago? The people put you there, Miss Lady. You not put yourself there. You had all these pie in the sky promises. Okay, everything is falling all over you, around you. Everything is just going hayway. When people are going to say enough is enough, listen, people can do within the law what they have to do without getting arrested. You can't lock up everybody here. And this Prime Minister is using because the Prime Minister and the government by extension seeing the writing on the wall. This is not happening by accident, They're seeing the writing on the wall. And people like you guys, the media and stuff, very, very be careful. Because this ain't happening by vaccine. It's a bigger picture behind this whole thing. Let's not be fooled. But I think the people are onto this Prime Minister and onto this government. Let's see how long they're going to take this nonsense. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Yep. So we're taking your calls 464-70033. 464-70033. 464-7003. 464-7003. All right. So taking your calls. What say you? Are you going to be joining me this evening on Constructive Talk? Yes or no? Because we're going to have some guests And they are going to be getting into this SOE. They're going to be weighing into it. All right? So, let's take your calls. Yes or no? What are your thoughts? 464-7003. All right? Okay, well, it doesn't seem as anybody else want to call in. And again, I want to thank all of you for being on the live, and sharing your views on issues that are confronting our nation, Trinidad and Tobago. This is really interesting. Really, really interesting. So, it's sad, It's sad this government had crime talks. This government have had consultation, all kind of thing. I don't understand. This was never discussed.
5 weeks ago, as the country emerged from a state of emergency, the Honorable Prime Minister expressed her resolve and that of her government to continue to monitor the activities of the criminal gangs in Trinidad and Tobago. She said then that she would not hesitate if the need arose to use all powers at her disposal to quell any upsurge in gang activity. Last night, upon learning of threatened further violent actions and planned reprisal killings by gang members, the Prime Minister triggered the provisions of the Constitution and asked Her Excellency the President to declare a state of emergency in Trinidad and Tobago. The proclamation was signed by Her Excellency and a state of emergency came into effect at 12:01 this morning. This government has demonstrated a clear, decisive, zero-tolerance approach to gang-related crime. Upon learning of a threat to state actors and facilities emanating from within the prisons, the government declared a state of public emergency in July of 2025. That state of emergency was extended by the Parliament in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and ended on January the 31st, 2026. During that period of time, July 2025 to January 2026, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the Defense Force conducted a number of operations and isolated certain gang leaders from the gangs and enterprises that they control. The threat was eliminated and significant headway in dismantling the organized criminal networks which have terrorized our population for over a decade, murdering members of the population and other citizens in cold blood and perpetrating heinous, despicable, violent crimes across the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. The murder rate and number of serious crimes dropped precipitously to the lowest recorded numbers in years, owing in no small measure to the diligent, intelligence-led efforts of the TTPS and the armed forces. The government, during that time and afterwards, sought to enact legislation that would allow the country to continue along this trajectory. The trajectory of drastically curbing crime and criminal activity by, in part, uprooting and permanently dismantling the gangs that were allowed to grow in power, reach, and wealth unchecked for the decade preceding our tenure. We were successful in some of these legislative efforts, but unfortunately unsuccessful in others. As the Prime Minister stated earlier this morning, the National Security Council met and was given a briefing by the Commissioner of Police last night. The Council was advised that over the last several days, a number of violent criminal activities have taken place in the full gaze of a horrified population, I might add, most of which have been carried out by members of organized criminal gangs. We were further advised that criminal gangs had increased acts of violence on a scale so extensive that they have resulted in multiple deaths in mass shootings, and that pattern of behavior was set to continue. The Prime Minister and the National Security Council had no choice. We immediately determined to advise Her Excellency, as I have said, that a state of public emergency existed in Trinidad and Tobago. This government is determined to never allow this country to deteriorate into the state of chaos and bloodshed which we met in May of 2025 when we took office. We shall never accept the slow, dangerous surrender to the criminal gangs in our midst. There are examples in the region of territories that have allowed that. Trinidad and Tobago's fate will be different. Under the conditions of the state of emergency, the TTPS and the armed forces will be able to do what they are entrusted by law to do in a manner that would match the escalating danger that is being posed to all of us as law-abiding citizens and to the very rule of law in Trinidad and Tobago. From the very early hours of this morning, strategic operations have commenced by the protective services. These will continue in an intelligence-led, targeted and deliberate manner until these threats to public safety are eliminated. We take this initial approach while concurrently putting various other measures in place that would constitute a longer-term, sustainable approach to maintaining order, peace, and safety in our society. We will continue to inform the public of various initiatives and operations taking place during this state of emergency as appropriate. I thank you.